It's Diane Mourglia-Swerdlow here for Expansions.com as we head into the third week of September. Already can hardly believe it. It's almost time for our seasons to officially change from fall to autumn, or from summer to autumn. Anyway, lots of interesting things going on in the news this past week, and of course what's the biggest news right away is still ISIS, and of course that is not going to go away. And apparently there's another video showing another beheading of another person, this time a British aid worker, David Haines. Now, David Haines apparently worked for several aid agencies in Croatia and helped to rebuild homes after the Balkans War. Then he also worked in Libya and South Sudan before he arrived in Syria, where he was abducted in March of 2013. And apparently the British government claims that they kept his capture a secret out of concern for his safety. And there is a lot of conspiracy talk out there, whether or not these beheadings are real or not. And of course, Stewart and I have been telling you about all of the head type of news articles that are on there. Somebody wrote in and told me that apparently in the word behead is the initials EAD. Now, I don't know if you know this, I didn't, but apparently EAD is a pornographic term, and I'm going to let you look it up if you need to. Apparently the E stands for eat, and or A, and the D stands for male genitalia, EAD. So they're putting that in front of people, apparently. And then, of course, you have to decide for yourself whether or not these films that they're showing you or purporting to have are actually in existence and true. And then I also wanted to tell you that now going back to, we've talked a lot about the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, which now all of a sudden is losing as much steam as it was as fast as it came onto the scene. However, it had a lot to do with bucket, and somebody wrote in telling me about a bucket list. And of course a bucket list means, what you want to do before you die. And now I see that there's a popular purse out there called a bucket purse. So whatever the bucket is, there's got to be more to that word as well. So if you have ideas on that, please let us know, because I'm always curious what you see, which may be different or on a different level than I see. Now also, moving along with ISIS, apparently Islamic State's, it says their war chest is growing daily. They're claiming, according to this article, that they earn more than $3 million a day from oil smuggling, human trafficking, theft, and extortion. And these facts and figures supposedly come from U.S. intelligence officials as well as private experts. They apparently have taken over as many as 11 oil fields in both countries of Syria and Iraq. And they're selling oil and other goods through generations-old smuggling networks. So who in the world is doing business with, apparently, the Islamic State militants? That's what I would like to know. But they are letting you know that they are here and they're a continuing presence, that they're growing, they're well organized, and they're well funded. So every time, and they're cruel and ruthless, let's not forget that. So every time they bring these people forward, they continue to build them as terrorists, as people who will stop at nothing to get their way. And as Stewart and I have told you before, it's like we are definitely heading for another Crusades. And speaking of that, we have a St. Louis-based publisher called Really Big Coloring Books, who apparently launched a few years ago a graphic 9/11 themed coloring book for children. Well, guess what they have done now? They have launched a coloring book for children themed with terrorism, although they're calling it anti-terrorism coloring book series, so that children can be provided with, quote, a terror update on global jihad. Apparently, the founder of this particular company, Wayne Bell, said that the publisher was reissuing its 2 terrorism-themed coloring books. The old one, We Shall Never Forget 9/11, the Kids' Book of Freedom, and the new one is called The True Faces of Evil Terror with trading cards. Now talk about something that's going to give kids nightmares. This was a very graphic article, so I hope you'll go to that link and look at it because they show pictures from the coloring book for kids to color in. It says that they're going to explain to children what ISIS is. Quote, "This is what ISIS wants to bring to America and its people." And then they have the image of a crucified man. Now, where else do we see crucifixion? With Jesus Christ, of course. And they say, "What are you going to do when they come for you?" Now, that's also a line out of a popular song. And this is what your little kids are going to be reading. The kids are going to be frightened over these things. They're also going to be showing the 5 Guantanamo detainees that the Obama administration broke the law by freeing. They have depictions of bin Laden. They have a portrait of the Boston Marathon bomber emblazoned with the words, quote, "Stone him." Now, Bell says that these are not fear-mongering. He claims that because terrorists are murdering people by the hundreds and by the thousands, that the children have a right to know. That says that right now the terrorists are in Iraq, they're cutting children in half because they're Christian children. So we're trying to educate the country on these animals, these brutal people, these terrible humans on the planet called ISIS, these terrorists. Now, Bell also says the books are not bigotry or fear-mongering, and so they're purely educational. He claims, quote, "The books are not about denigrating or maligning Muslims or the Islamic faith. The books are about terror and from where it originates. There is not a racial component to the books. We do not cover race or religion. We do cover radicals of all backgrounds." And he claims that the books are selling well for now. Now, as you know, what we teach you in Hyperspace Oversoul work is that the more you focus on anything, the more that it grows. And also, because of this, in my opinion, these books are about mind controlling and brainwashing young children so that they will know nothing else by the time they turn into an adult. And this is no different than what they're claiming that those terrorists are doing with their own children. This is going to be instilling fear and even hate in these children for years and generations perhaps to come if they get their way. They are preparing them for the new crusades. Now, Sarah Palin, I posted her video on my Facebook page, had some interesting things to say about President Obama, and I'm going to quote her on this. She says, quote, "It's time to take action and do what we can to stop this imperial president. That includes the House doing its job and considering impeachment. I'm taking a stand and hope you will join me. Use your voice, call your congressman today. We'll be speaking to you directly more often in the near future like this, so stay tuned. Thank you for being in this fight. Together we'll take our country back." And what my comment on this is that somebody has to lead the disenchanted people. Remember, there's always something for everybody. So my question is, where will she lead these people? So think on that one. Now, Canada has some interesting find. You might have seen this in the news because remember, we're seeing again more of the Arctic and Antarctica in the news. And here they have found 2 British explorer ships that disappeared in the Arctic more than 160 years ago. These ships were looking for an Arctic passage to Asia until they decided that was too far north for practical use. So, now listen to this. They found 2 ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. There's that word again. So since terror is a buzzword and to me a trigger word at this point, I decided to look up the word Erebus to see what that meant. And Erebus is the dark region of the underworld where the dead must pass before they reach Hades. So here we have Terror and Erebus. And the other thing is there is a Mount Erebus in Antarctica, which is a volcano. So we have again the Arctic and Antarctica. We have lots of things about terror in the underworld going on here. So keep your eyes open. There's also an announcement this week about Earth's protective ozone layer is recovering thanks to international agreement, say NASA scientists. Well, my question always was, I'm not so sure anything was wrong with the ozone. So I'm just throwing that out there for you to think about. And regarding the weather and what's going to be happening and what I call global warming, which we've of course warned you about for many years, Parts of South Dakota this last week were already buried under 8 inches of snow. There was snow in Colorado, and there was a lot of very Arctic type of weather happening in not even the middle of September. If Stewart was here, he'd probably be making all kinds of faces. So, again, watch what's happening, and you must learn to discern. And this is why Stewart and I tell you these trends. And I know a lot of people say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. These things haven't happened. These things are happening and have for as long as Stewart and I have been telling you, but it's very slow, and that is what makes it so ominous. You can't necessarily tell unless you're watching the trends, which is what we do, and we help to bring this to your attention. Now, here is another interesting story. I mean, they're all interesting, of course. So, this is an online application run by, listen to this, the Space Science Institute in Boulder, Colorado, called Killer Asteroids. And in this application, you can actually destroy your city with an asteroid strike. So if you want to know what your city is going to look like, you can go to this app, you can watch an asteroid come down and destroy your city. Doesn't that sound like fun? And again, Stewart and I have been talking to you about the asteroids in space. We've been telling you that there are going to be a lot of them near misses and so forth as they bring your attention outward. And now if something does happen, you're just going to think it's an asteroid that's hit. And there could actually be a war in space going on, and it might be a while before you wake up to that fact. And speaking of mind control and brainwashing, this was another fascinating article that I found on the internet about mind-controlling parasites. This one says they're freaky, and apparently there are a lot of them. There are such things as suicidal crickets and zombie caterpillars. This young man, Ed Young, apparently is a science writer who's been studying parasites and says that they manipulate other creatures from the creepy crawlies, we'll say, on up into mammals to do specific behavior. And he actually talks about a one-cell parasite called a toxo for short. I'm not going to tell you the long scientific name. And he estimates that 1 in 3 people in the world have this toxo in their brain. And because there's evidence that the brain influences the host, because even in mammals, people, at this point, they score differently on tests and have more accidents. And he says that perhaps people are being bent to the will of something else. And he goes into with the insects and the like mice about how when the parasites get into them, how they force their host into different behavior that the animal would not necessarily have had they not had this parasite in them. So I thought this was really fascinating. It's about a 13-minute video clip. It's a little bit longer, but it's worth your time to watch it if you've got a few extra minutes. And how about an underground city in the Grand Canyon that supposedly was documented in the year 1909? Don't know if you saw this one going around. I saw it a little bit on the internet. This was apparently in the Arizona Gazette on Monday, April 5th, 1909, saying that there was an explorer, Mr. Kincaid, who found an underground city, and they go into explicit detail, and it's huge, so you really need to read this article. A lot of fascinating stuff out there. But anyway, he supposedly called the Smithsonian Institute, and supposedly the Smithsonian came out, and they were saying that they spent a number of years exploring this and talking about Oriental origin of what they found, that it was definitely made by human hands, and that possibly was traced from Egypt, tracing back to Ramses. They talked about the hieroglyphics, there were tablets, all kinds of things that were found in these caves. Now, also, there are Hopis who live in the Hopi American Indians, whatever you want to call them these days, it's politically correct. Apparently, their traditions said that their ancestors once lived in an underworld in the Grand Canyon until dissension arose between the good and the bad. So then when this author went to the Smithsonian to follow up on this specific article, the Smithsonian said they have no record of this happening and the stories probably were made up. So what reminded me, and I've told you this before, and so has Stewart, when we were going through Mammoth Cave in Missouri, which is one of the largest caves in the U.S., we were told by the tour guides that at one time there were dinosaurs that looked like they were sleeping found in these caves. And they called the Smithsonian Institute, the owners of the property at the time. The Smithsonian came, collected all the dinosaur carcasses, and a few weeks passed, the owners called the Smithsonian and they said, "What about the dinosaurs you found?" And the Smithsonian said, "What dinosaurs?" This also reminds me when Stewart and I were in Suriname a couple of years ago, and the indigenous people told us that there was a huge cave that was found in the backcountry of Suriname, and the Smithsonian came in and spent 7 years cleaning out that cave. So a lot of things are going on in the world that you're not being told about, obviously. The Dalai Lama. Now, the Dalai Lama always is in the news. And this one I thought was pretty eye-opening, where he says, quote, "Let us finish with a popular Dalai Lama, and he sees no need for a successor." Quote, "We had a Dalai Lama for almost 5 centuries. The 14th Dalai Lama now is very popular," of course referring to himself. "Let us then finish with a popular Dalai Lama," unquote. Now, this I thought was kind of interesting for a couple of articles, because I always thought it was the same Dalai Lama that reincarnated every single time. So perhaps what I know is incorrect. I'm sure you'll let me know what the truth is. He hopes to live, this particular one, to be 113 years old. And he was identified as the reincarnation of the 13th Dalai Lama at the age of 2. And I thought it was always the same soul, except inhabiting different bodies, but perhaps I'm incorrect. And then he follows with this news by saying that he would not be opposed to a woman's successor, and even thought that might be a better option for Tibet. "I think it would be good," he says. "Now we are in the 21st century. Females have more potential regarding the promotion of human compassion," unquote. So again, we're talking about the last pope. Are we talking about the last Dalai Lama? Are we talking about world religion here? Let's keep our eyes wide open. Speaking of seeing things that you might want to close your eyes for, apparently there was a devil statue that appeared in Vancouver. And you know, I took this article out, I believe it was Vancouver, Washington. I'm not 100% sure, and my apologies on that one. I usually try and make sure I have all the details correct as best as I can, but apparently somebody erected it on a pedestal that used to hold a statue of Christopher Columbus. It's actually on a state property. Now this is a life-size, or maybe a little bit bigger, of a devil statue painted bright red, and I will tell you that his male genitalia was, as they said, erect. So yes, it is the city of Vancouver, but still not telling me if it's in the US or not. All right. The City of Vancouver spokesperson Sarah Cooper said the statue is not a piece of city-commissioned artwork. Well, that's a relief, and consequently it's been removed. But anyway, this one's got pictures. You want to take a look, and it's got one of those NSFWs, so you're not supposed to look at this one at work. But anyway, that was interesting. And then it says, meanwhile in Oklahoma, that Satanists are preparing to hold a black mass this month at the Oklahoma Civic Center. Notice how everything happens in Oklahoma, from bombings to earthquakes to the Satanists. So Oklahoma, obviously in the center of our country, has got something going on here we want to keep our eyes on. The Satanists plan to parody Roman Catholic liturgy by demonstrating their opposition to Orthodox Christian beliefs and practices. Participants will be wearing robes and cowls while renouncing God. At the moment, there have been 42 tickets sold for the 80-seat theater. Now, there's an assistant professor of theology at Emory University, Anthony Brigman, who says, quote, "The goal seems to be to acquire some of the spiritual power and magic that they associate with the Roman Catholic ritual of transubstantiation, which means the transformation of the Eucharistic bread and wine into the actual body and blood of Christ," unquote. And this is also, because remember I've been telling you about all these poo stories lately. It says, normally the black mass will contain a nude female, which is known as a flesh altar, who urinates into a chamber pot. Remember we saw the woman, or I told you about the woman urinating on the IS flag. However, due to Oklahoma's nudity laws, she will be clothed and they will use a contraption that pours vinegar to simulate urination. And I've been talking to you about all these things. Why are they showing the poo and the pee? And somebody else wrote in to tell me, apparently in satanic ritual, they do use a lot of feces and urine, I guess, in their rituals. So, all of this is preparing you, and they're opening this frequency, so it's not a surprise to you anymore. And on top of that, the Satanic Temple is attempting to place a statue of Beelzebub at the Oklahoma State Capitol as part of the protest against the placement of the Ten Commandments on public property. So is this a joining of Christianity and, I guess you call it satanic worship? We'll find out. Vampire therapy could reverse aging. Now, I did tell you when they were doing the vampire facelifts, or facials, I guess they were called at the time. Now, apparently, they're saying that scientists have found that young blood actually recharges the brain and forms new blood vessels. It improves memory and improves learning. So, apparently, they're experimenting on mice. And, of course, they're saying, they have to now decide what they're going to do as far as experimenting on people. But it does talk about that throughout history, cultures across the globe have extolled the properties of youthful blood, with children sacrificed and the blood of young warriors drunk by the victors. And they claim that North Korean dictator Kim Jong-il injected himself with blood from healthy young virgins to slow the aging process. We always have to go back to North Korea for some reason. You don't need to know anything about how the brain works. It says you give an old mouse young blood and you see if the animal is smarter. And nobody's done that before. They have, and now the old mouse is smarter than it was before. Quote, future studies are warranted in aged humans and potentially those suffering from age-related neurodegenerative disorders, unquote. Our data, one more quote, I guess, from the same person, although it's a scientist that's studying it, does not give his name even in the article. Our data indicates the exposure of aged mice to young blood late in life is capable of rejuvenating synaptic plasticity and improving cognitive function. So there you have it. Now we're going to move on to amulets. Amulets and Christianity, because an ancient Christian charm from the 6th century was discovered in Manchester Library. Apparently it was written on a papyrus dating from the 6th century, which is supposedly giving us a glimpse into early Christian life. This 1,500-year-old document says that when they translated it, that the character of the text is such that it looks like a charm to protect from evil. And they're telling you that it even talks about Psalm 148:5, which proclaims the power of God, followed by a passage from Matthew that tells the story of the Last Supper. So they're taking magic and amulets and charms and tying that into the Bible. So we're going to continue to watch as they're building their case for the New World Religion. That's, again, not going to go away. Okay, on another note, we have a new type of dinosaur that's been discovered called Spinosaurus, which was a semi-aquatic animal. Before, they said all dinosaurs, they believe, stayed to the land with occasional brief trips into the water. Now they're saying that this particular dinosaur is a terrifying cross between Tyrannosaurus rex, a crocodile, and a whale. And it could walk as well as swim. And they're saying this is a whole new opening for the world of dinosaurs. So where they're going to take us with that, I don't know. Maybe the Loch Ness Monster. Who knows what they're going to tell us. And move over Siri. If you have Siri on your phone, now they have something called the Jibo robot. The Jibo robot is a new breed of robots, which they're calling social robots. And the ultimate goal is to make Jibo, the robot, feel like it's part of the family. Surprise, surprise. Right now, this developer, Cynthia Brazil, who's had a personal robots group, and we talked about that last week and what the personal robot might be able to do for you at some point in time. Apparently, she wants hers to sell between $4.99 US for consumers and $5.99 for developers. So it says the price is in line with a high-end smartphone. But Jibo is going to be much more. So watch for this trend to continue to grow, because they say she's not the only one working on these social robots, which is obvious. And alopecia. Alopecia is where you lose your hair, period. And this could be at any age, and it usually doesn't grow back. Now, this can be a very serious disease if you have it. And what are people doing to get attention? Well, what are they doing these days to get attention for anything? The alopecia sufferers are going naked and having a calendar. And the reason I'm bringing that to your attention is because if anybody these days wants to bring awareness to any cause, they start stripping. And so again, it's no big deal anymore. You know, naked people walking around, standing on the street, doing this, doing that. You're not paying attention anymore because now it's becoming normal, unfortunately. And I spoke to you last week about the amputees and what's going on with that. Here we have a quadruple amputee, Karen Crespo, who was on the runway and rediscovering her self-confidence. So that is also a trend. And again, I think that's leading again back into the robotics. So my sympathies and empathies go out to these people. But again, unfortunately, there's too many people being used. You have to be aware of that. We have a Texas official freaking out about school meatless Monday. Of course, in Texas, it's known for raising beef. And this particular Texas official does receive money from the cattlemen who raise meat in the state of Texas. But what he says is interesting. He says that the school officials have scaled back on serving meat 1 day a week and claims, quote, "This is a carefully orchestrated campaign to force Americans to become vegetarians." And this is what Stewart and I have been telling you. And now we're hearing it from the officials. So he says restricting children's meal choice to not include meat is irresponsible and has no place in our schools, unquote. And we also want to note that school districts around the country have also been embracing meatless Mondays. In fact, in 2009, a Baltimore district became the first in the country to adopt the initiative, and then it says also a district in Houston. So you watch for more of that to happen too. So anyway, those are my top stories. There's so much going on in the news, but these are showing you the trends. We continue to tell you about the ones we've presented to you and explain to you how they're continuing to be basically forced upon you. So take control of your own mind before somebody else takes it for you. Now, I want to remind you that we're right around the corner from the October seminar, Everything Over Soul and the Alien Agenda. And we are really down to just 2 or 3 more seats. If you're interested in coming or you're trying to get your plans together, at least contact Patricia and let her know, because there in this next week I'm going to be making a final decision on our venue, depending upon the number of people that we have come. And also, I'm in the process, for those of you who have said, "Oh, I want to be there, I just can't get away," we're in the process of putting together a pay-per-view option. So if you're interested in the pay-per-view option, let Patricia know as well. But be watching the website within the next few days, 3-4 days to a week maybe. If this can be viable, we will be announcing that. So if you really want to be here, but whatever happens, it's work circumstance, maybe you just don't want to deal with traveling these days, I understand. The cost of the hotels and the food is an expense. So if you want to be here, you really have to want to be here these days. We are going to make it so you can join us virtually, so to speak. We invite you to become a member of our community. This month we are working on deep cleansing and deep healing. We're getting a lot of amazing information that's coming up behind the scenes. Stewart has had a stellar performance in Iceland. He was well received in both the north and the south. He's in Poland right now. He had a great audience in Poland. He said people came from Austria, from Holland, from France, from all over Europe to see him. So he wants to thank everybody who has gone through this tribe from Romania. There was a whole contingent from Romania that drove 30 hours straight to get there to see him. So the receptivity as well. You know, people need and want this information. This is practical, easy to implement information where you learn to become your own teacher. And that's the point of the work that we do. We don't want you emulating who and what we are. We want you to be the best that you can be. And all this stuff going on in the world, you can learn to observe it and not participate and not focus on it and not feed it and not allow it to feed your fears, not allow it to trigger you or activate your programming. You can go on and you can have a life independent of all this stuff that's going on in the news. It's an amazing show, I will tell you that much. It is a totally amazing show, and it's totally orchestrated for your benefit should you choose to participate. Stewart and I choose not to participate. We have a lot of people reading our work who choose not to participate. So you make your own decisions. And the next step after October, we have January, our Hyperspace Oversoul Extravaganza week. That is amazing. So if you're trying to decide between October and January, there's no way that we can film that and put that up for you. So if you're going one or the other, I'm going to tell you right now, you need to come to January. And again, it's limited seating on that. If you think about that you might want to be here, let Patricia know so we can make the plans, because once our January class is filled, that's it. We will not accept any more applications. And that class is really what you need to move into our Oversoul Mastermind group, which is our think tank. And in our think tank, that's where you have total access to Stewart and I. We have private training for this group. We meet via webinar once a month, and we have a private forum on our site for the OMG group people. So that is for if you're really committed to this work, and we have a lot of really fine information that comes out of there. A lot of good research goes on in that group. So a lot of things. And if you're new to expansions.com, we have a welcome package. Look for that on the site. It's a good way to kind of get your feet wet, and even the blogs, you know, the membership. It's a good way to decide if you do or you don't want to explore this a little bit further with us, because really we are simply explorers of consciousness. We go as deep inside as we can. We take a look at everything that's going on within the mind of God, which is simply a reflection of what's going on within us, and vice versa. So anyway, I appreciate the fact that you take the time to listen to what Stewart and I have to say. And more than that, I appreciate the time that you take to take care of yourself, so that we can all add to the upliftment of humanity and not to the degradation, which obviously is going on these days. So thank you so much. Please read our Facebook pages, because we put things on there that we don't put on our site. Like our fan page, because again, you see things there that you don't see on our site or on the videos. We have so much information out there. It's just we can't get it out to you fast enough, but we're doing our best. Stewart and I both work 24/7. We keep ourselves informed so we can keep you informed. Thank you again. This is Diane Mourglia-Swerdlow for expansions.com.